Good afternoon. Welcome to Threat Watch, the 15-minute or so podcast from Lumify Cyber, where we're going to talk about stuff that happened this week in cybersecurity and try and make it make sense. So I'm back with Fred, EVP of Professional Services. Fred, before we get going, I know this is on your mind and other people's minds, and I've been talking to customers trying to get them on board with this, but we're getting to the point of the year when organizations are going to need to get their penetration tests, tabletop exercise, right? The regulatory stuff that they're going to have to get knocked out. And there's going to be a real end of the year rush because there always is. So, any guidance you want to give anybody about scheduling? Because Q3 is right around the corner, buddy, and that's when it's all got to get on paper.
Yeah, don't wait till the end of the year, folks. I mean, we do have a limited number of people on staff. We want to give you the best possible service. So get your stuff in Q3, talk to us, at least figure out what your budgetary requirements are going to be. Start the process. Don't wait till the last minute.
Yep. Okay, so yesterday we did a Threat Lab Live webinar, and I started it off by talking about the scattered spider gang. Well, these guys are showing up everywhere. One thing that we pointed out was that scattered spider focuses on a single sector at a time, at least historically, okay? And we saw them going after retailers in the UK, and then they started hitting retail in the US. It looks like they've moved on from that to insurance. So just this week, it was Erie Insurance and Philadelphia Insurance. I think it's interesting that they picked two that are named after their cities of origin, but I don't think that means anything or has anything to do with anything.
Yeah.
So, hey, now, okay, here's another chapter in this, this gang's sordid history. Do you read this? What do you think about this? And what should we be telling insurance companies right now?
Yeah, well, I think it's what we should be telling everyone right now, frankly. I mean, this is a incredibly well-organized methodology they seem to be implying. They have not, these are the ones we're talking, the verticals we're talking about, but they're historically started with technology, telecoms, financial services, business process outsourcing, gaming, MGM,
gaming
Caesars,
for sure, yeah.
Right, hospitality, retail, media and entertainment, and now insurance. Okay, I mean, this is an industry, right? Again, third largest economy in the world, right, behind China and the U.S. This is well-run, well-organized strategy to move through different verticals. Their whole approach is to specialize in their social engineering techniques. In particular, they not only use like phishing and things like that, but they're very into SIM swapping, right? Mm-hmm. That's one of the key things people are forgetting. It's not just, hey, I'm going to protect myself with good multi-factor. If SIM swapping is part of the equation, and this group is very good at pulling that off, that takes a whole another avenue of protection out of your hands and potentially puts it in an attacker. So they're very advanced in the techniques. It's not just, hey, I'm going to spam you with a million MFA alerts and hope fatigue sets in, although that is part of what they do. Erie's already getting a class action lawsuit. No surprise there. Yep. Insurance companies are a great place to find monetizable records. But it was interesting. Erie is car, home, and business. Philadelphia Insurance Companies, which is a Tokyo Marine group. Some of our listeners may have cyber insurance through Tokyo Marine. Yep. But this is their group that only works in commercial property and casualty and professional liability. So interesting that they targeted those data stores. That's not the standard records that usually you think of going after. So maybe ransomware is what it was about. And why do I say that? Well, the recent report says that all of the latest scattered spider incidents have ended with them dropping DragonForce ransomware onto them and using that as the ransomware platform. So here we have like IBM merging with Oracle in the crime world here, right?
Well, yes. Yes and no. And so the DragonForce, right, the one that rebranded themselves as a cartel, and they're going to use the 5 families model of governance, things like this. They appear to be successful at this because, right, that's the affiliate model. And so the scattered spider gang, they're a bunch of teens and 20-somethings, and they're finding out that they can make crap loads of money. Somebody else is handling malware development, payment processing, negotiation, right, all of those things. and all they got to do, they're focused on initial access, right? They're the ones that get in. And some of their tactics, right? I mean, you went through a few of them. It's also not only calling the help desk to impersonate an employee, it's calling an employee to impersonate the help desk and say, hey, we got to reset your multi-factor authentication because the scattered spider gang is out there. And so read to me the code that just came over your phone, right? Right. So
Yep.
these guys are tricky. And so I think it's time to batten down the hatches if you're in the insurance business, because if they do focus on a single sector at a time, your ticket just got punched. So this means changing process on help desk password resets, letting your users know what to do if they think they've been SIM swapped, to your point.
Yep.
Make sure everyone knows to report strange contacts that were not expected, like the help desk calling you for an MFA reset, right? But remember, they also bribe, coerce, and threaten, right? And your users just need to be made aware of these tactics, because if anything weird happens, they got to hold up a hand. If you see something, say something. All right. Well, all right. So this is the big story this week on criminal activity, right? There's these two insurance companies going down, kind of bam, bam. Um, this one from government caught my eye. Congress has before them an opportunity to reauthorize the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, and they should do that with all haste. Now, the Information Sharing Act of 2015 created the legal foundation for businesses to share threat information with federal agencies quickly and safely without fear of lawsuits or regulatory action, right? Because if you're in the confines of this information sharing and you make a disclosure that indicates you were not compliant with your regulatory requirements, you don't want to have a regulator there beating you with a baseball bat for that, right? So, I without that provision, there's going to be a real reluctance to provide information on successful attacks, TTPs, right? That CISA uses to inform others. So we cannot let this break down. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, well, I think there's some people that are somehow think, well, this is just trying to push this down to the states to recreate that. But you cannot provide that protection from federal law
Mm-mm.
at the state level. So this has to be a federally enacted protection, right? A safe harbor here. So if that's not there, the state law is only protected from state prosecutions. Well, that's not going to do much, right?
Yeah.
Especially as the internet is
Especially if
intra-state.
there's
It's all
50 state
intrastate, right?
laws.
Exactly. So that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Of course, this came out of the Financial Services ISAC, is where
Yes.
this idea of let's all start sharing data. And frankly, they've done a really good job of it. I would hate to see that infrastructure go away, but things are getting worse, like Zoomcar, Scania, a couple eye care firms, WestJet. Things are
That was
popping
all
out
this
there.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all this week.
That's the body count.
And then, of course, the cherry on top, you and I will talk about, well, it's going to be the great power struggle between Taiwan and China. Well, apparently Israel and Iran are going to beat us to that.
Yeah.
And the official test, the real test, we do tabletops, with the real test, folks, might be right around the corner. So I'm telling Congress, please,
Yes.
now more than ever, we need help.
Yeah. So I remember when I was on DHS Government Coordinating Council, and how strict the rules were about information sharing, and how a federal person, a federal representative, had to be in the room for something called the CPAC rules in order for you to convey certain things, right? I mean, so yeah, the FS-ISAC did a good job of like breaking the ground on this. You are insulated from regulatory oversight for disclosures you make here. I think ISACs, for the most part, didn't do a whole lot, right? So, yes, please renew the act. And so it's interesting that you brought up Iran, because you've seen this. We're being warned that the Iran-Israel conflict may hit the U.S., right? They're saying there's going to be bleed over, and this is not something that we want. And we have no control over this. And it's kind of thing. Look, they're shooting civilians, all right? They're bombing indiscriminately. Do you think they would think twice about going for power, water, healthcare in this country to prove a point?
Yeah, I think we will see the first legitimate kind of cyberkinetic attack, right, causing something to have a natural disaster like impact right here in the States. I mean, who knows what we're gonna do? but I would say absolutely we have 100% chance of this happening in some future scenario if we do in fact join this effort, right? Physically join this effort. The thing that we have to worry about, like we already know that is a favorite target. Water sector was a very favorite target of the Iranian cyber espionage for the U.S. or for the Iranian government. We know, for example, this week, 40,000, it was in the blast, right? The blast that you put out every week,
Oh, the
40,000
cameras?
vulnerable cameras on the
Yeah.
internet. Just it shows there's really still, we don't have a concept of cyber hygiene, especially in the device world. And I think everybody needs to break out those business continuity plans, right? And figure out what happens if something outside of my organization that I rely on disappears, right? How do I
Yeah.
continue business? How do I continue operations? That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what else we can say about that. If you're in a critical sector, it's a real good idea to understand what you have facing the internet, make sure everything is patched up to current, and yes, understand what your dependencies are on things like power, water, right? Things like that. And, your employees have to be part of that calculation too, because if there is like waste treatment plant gets shut down, public health emergency right away. Okay, that means your employees are going to take that on the chin. I'd also study Iranian TTPs. They use phishing a lot, and that's reasonably easy to educate your users about that. So, I mean, again, warn your people, your employees, that the threat level is high, and depending on what sector you're in, you may be targeted or end up as collateral damage. And I don't want to like freak out here, but watching what's going on and the tit for tat and the fact that the longer this goes on, the less chance diplomacy has to work.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're like 6 days into it now, and it hasn't abated at all.
Yeah. So one thing I'll tag on to the end of that, the last slide that I always put through on my regional tabletops, I've been going through the Midwest, delivering those all up and down the Midwest. And the last slide is the automated traffic management system is been hacked, and now all lights on all signals are green in all directions. That cascades to, I have ambulances that can't get to victims that are at crash sites. I have ambulances that can't get back to the hospital. I have doctors that can't get to the hospital to fill the emergency need, because now all of a sudden I'm getting a huge rush of patients. I can't get supplies to the hospital because they can't get through town. Right? This shows the cascading effects of one single infrastructure system that we rely on. Take that out, amazing. Unfortunately, the ripple effect. So, with that horror show in mind, Mike, tell us something. Tell us something good, buddy.
It is so hard to laugh.
Yeah.
This week after everything has gone on,
Yeah.
just like everybody's getting cybered. There are 3 shooting wars, well, 2.5 shooting wars going on. And, I mean, I'm all right. So here's a startup that'll get your attention, okay? There's a new dating site out there, and neither you nor I need a dating site. So I'm not particularly fascinated with this, but the article just killed me, okay? It's trying to counter the typical old photos that you put on, right? That, hey, here's what I looked like 20 years ago. Hey, right? And the glowing bios that people use. They're trying to counter that by matching people with their browser histories. Okay. All right. Now, I'm not sure what this company's being called yet. And I think this guy is in Belgium that's doing this startup. But imagine if your searches were for bomb making materials.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Or how to cook a squirrel, or why does my cat want to kill me, right? Who's it going to match? So do we really want people like that hooking up and finding each other? I mean, if this guy actually goes into business, the jokes are going to write themselves. I perversely, I can't wait for this.
Yeah, actually, this is the most terrifying piece of news this week. So thank you, Mike.
Okay, that's it. We're out of time. All right.
Okay.
Go sign up for the InfoSec Insider Daily News Blast. Watch our site for events. We're going to be doing security awareness training in a couple of weeks on the last Friday of the month. And Fred, I will see you later.
All right. See you next week.